Dawn Patrol found it. Green Chevy, door ajar, keys still in, purse on the passenger seat.
You think she slipped into the canal?
Then explain the baling twine in the mud and those blood drops on the door frame.
Whose truck?
Lena Marie, 21. Clocked out at 9:45. Never made it home.
So where is she?
That's what Silver Creek has to answer. And whatever it brings up, Cedar Falls won't forget.
Lena Marie's green Chevrolet pickup truck was left abandoned by the Silver Creek Canal in the misty dawn, its door ajar, her purse still on the passenger seat. On the night of October 5, 2005, the 21-year-old left her shift at the Cedar Falls Food Distribution Center, but never made it back to her family's ranch. Her mother called repeatedly, the phone ringing through the small farmhouse before falling silent in the chilly void. The next morning, workers spotted dried blood droplets on the truck's doorframe alongside scattered strands of baling twine amid the mud. Cedar Falls, a peaceful farming community, was suddenly shrouded in suspicion and fear. And what emerged from that cold canal would haunt Iowa for 2 decades. Quick note before we dig in, this is a brand new channel. If careful, timeline-driven true crime is your thing, please subscribe and tap the bell. You'll be one of my first supporters. And help this video reach more viewers. Comment your location and the exact time you're watching this video. I'll shout out a few in the next upload. Lena Marie, born in 1985 in Cedar Falls, Iowa, was the only daughter of a ranching family living on the city's northern outskirts, where corn, wheat, and soybean fields stretched to the horizon. The Maries weren't wealthy, but they lived simply, sustained by hard work and the bond of their trio. To her parents, Lena was their greatest hope, not just as their only child, but because she brought warmth, the only one who could fill their old farmhouse with laughter. From a young age, Lena stood out for her cheerful, approachable nature and rare work ethic. She could rise at dawn, head to the barn with her father to clean hay troughs, then rush off to part-time jobs at a grocery store or the city's food distribution center. Friends often said she was always smiling, even with hay-scented clothes and mud-caked boots. Lena's smile seemed to erase the exhaustion of a long day, making others believe life, however tough, was still worth living. Her biggest dream was to become a physical therapist, a job that suited her devoted and compassionate nature. She often confided to her best friend about enrolling in a community college in Cedar Falls, working to cover her own tuition. She didn't want to stay on the ranch forever or burden her parents with her future. Passing Mercy West Hospital, she'd gaze at its lit windows at night, imagining herself helping patients recover. But that dream was left unfinished. On the evening of October 5, 2005, Lena finished a late shift at the food distribution center near Cedar Falls's western edge. Around 9:45 p.m., she left the parking lot, driving the family's old Chevrolet pickup toward home. The familiar route, less than a half-hour drive, crossed the Silver Creek and veered toward the suburbs, a path she'd taken hundreds of times. But that night, Lena never arrived. By 10:15 p.m., in the small farmhouse, her mother grew anxious. The landline rang repeatedly, but no one answered. The second call rang long before cutting off. The third got a busy signal, then silence. Her father, usually reserved and calm, paced the living room, eyes fixed on the wall clock as if time could explain his daughter's delay. By midnight, Lena's cell phone was completely unreachable. Her mother called her close friends, hoping someone had given her a ride, but all said they hadn't seen her since her shift ended. Outside, cold autumn winds swept through empty fields, dry leaves scraping dirt roads, the sky heavy with ominous clouds. In the Marie home, the air grew stifling, anxiety mounting by the minute. A town accustomed to quiet rhythms was suddenly steeped in unease. From that moment, a haunting question emerged. Where did Lena go? And why didn't she come home? That question tormented her parents through the long night. As the dim light of the next morning fell over Iowa's cornfields, a shocking report arrived. The Marie's old green Chevrolet pickup was found on a narrow dirt road by the Silver Creek Canal. A farmer hauling hay noticed it unmoved since the previous night, the driver's door slightly open. No sign of its owner. When Black Hawk County deputies received the call, they rushed to the scene. The truck looked abandoned in haste. Lena's purse remained untouched on the passenger seat, containing her wallet, driver's license, some cash, and personal items. Nothing was missing. No signs of rummaging. The keys still in the ignition, the door unlocked. If this was a robbery, it was bizarrely implausible. This very intactness unnerved everyone, suggesting Lena left the truck unprepared. Then a chilling detail, small dark red stains dried over hours, marked the truck's doorframe. They were faint, just smudges, but investigators recognized them as blood. Near the wheel, scattered orange baling twine, nylon cords used by local farmers to bind hay lay in the mud. Common in the area, their presence at the abandoned truck site was eerily out of place. Deputies sealed off the area, setting up yellow tape and calling in forensics to collect blood and trace evidence. The air by the canal grew heavy, mingling damp earth and rotting grass with suffocating tension. The Maries rushed to the scene. Lena's mother ran, calling her daughter's name, clinging to faint hope she'd wandered off and would return. But seeing the abandoned truck, the untouched purse, and the faint bloodstains, she broke into sobs, her cries drowning out the click of reporters' cameras. Her father stood silently, his calloused hands gripping the truck door as if seeking his daughter's lingering warmth. The sheriff, maintaining composure for the press, stated, "We're investigating this as a suspicious disappearance. Anyone with information about Lena Marie last night, please come forward immediately." Despite the cautious words, fear had already seeped into the community. News spread rapidly. Local TV aired images of the cordoned-off truck, a ticker reading, 21-year-old woman missing, vehicle abandoned near Silver Creek. Newspapers, usually covering farm fairs or church events, now featured the lone green Chevrolet on their front pages. In coffee shops, stores, and farmers' markets, people buzzed with talk. Some whispered, Lena might have had an accident and slipped into the canal. Others suspected a predator, but all agreed the dried blood was undeniable proof something terrible had happened. The quiet village grew tense. People who once left doors unlocked now bolted them shut. Children who biked freely were kept in yards. As reporters, neighbors, and friends speculated, Lena's parents sat motionless in their small farmhouse, the phone ringing with calls from relatives, reporters, and neighbors. Her mother clutched a photo of Lena, eyes red, answering in despair. Her father repeated one sentence to police. "She never went anywhere without telling us. If she didn't come home, something's wrong." That morning, amid whistling winds and rising fear, it was clear this wasn't a random disappearance, but the start of a dark mystery that would haunt Iowa for years. News of the truck abandoned by the Silver Creek with dried blood and scattered twine quickly made Lena Marie's disappearance a top priority for authorities. That afternoon, the Black Hawk County Sheriff held an urgent meeting at headquarters, ordering a large-scale search. A mixed team was formed. County deputies, volunteers from Cedar Falls and nearby towns, Civil Air Patrol for aerial observation, and a K-9 unit to sniff out clues at the scene. Dozens of locals, farmers, students, church members joined in. To them, Lena wasn't a stranger. She was the smiling girl at the distribution center, helping her parents harvest corn, a familiar face at Sunday services. The search wasn't just duty. It was a community's obligation. That night, small boats with rudimentary sonar scanned the canal. Flashlights cut through the pitch-black night, reflecting off thin ice forming early for October. A cold rain fell, pelting raincoats and helmets, making the already grueling task harsher. Volunteers shivered but pressed on. The water's silence, fueling fears of the worst. The K-9 unit picked up Lena's scent near the bank, but strong winds erased it. They led officers to a spot with fresh skid marks in wet soil, but divers found only pebbles and roots below. On day 2, the search expanded. Civil Air Patrol deployed small planes along the canal and surrounding wetlands, using binoculars and cameras to capture every detail. Photos were scrutinized, revealing only half-harvested cornfields and icy waters. The sheriff at a press conference vowed, "We won't give up. We'll keep searching for Lena until we know what happened." But an early snow, defying forecasts, swept in. Northern winds brought thick white flakes, blanketing fields and burying faint clues. Locals split into small groups, probing ditches and brush with sticks. The church stayed open all night, serving hot soup and coffee, doubling as a prayer hub. Pickup trucks lined dirt roads loaded with shovels, flashlights, and determined people braving the cold. Yet time passed with no sign of Lena. Among the searchers, David Miller, Lena's boyfriend, drew attention. He joined from day 1, bundled in a heavy coat, scanning the riverbank with a flashlight. But while others were frantic, David seemed oddly detached. He spoke little, avoided eye contact with reporters, and chain-smoked, trailing behind rather than leading. Some volunteers whispered, "His girlfriend's missing, her truck's got blood, yet he's too calm." Rumors spread in the tight-knit community, suspicion gathering around David. Though police named no suspects, everyone knew those closest to a victim are first scrutinized. The image of searchers in the snow, contrasted with David's aloof figure, etched itself into the town's memory. Days yielded nothing. New ice locked the canal, halting dives. Flashlights on the water reflected only darkness and stillness. Anxiety turned to despair. The Maries were drained. Lena's mother cried until hoarse, her father a silent shadow, staring blankly at the canal for hours. Iowa shared a collective fear. A young woman had vanished, leaving a deserted truck, bloodstains, and a trembling town in an early winter. Heavy October snows halted the search, but Lena's absence lingered over Cedar Falls. Police vowed to resume when weather allowed, while the Maries lived in lightless days. Each night, Lena's mother sat by the window, waiting for her daughter's truck to pull into the snowy yard, knowing deep down it wouldn't. Then, on a bleak Monday in November, a horrifying discovery turned faint hope into cruel reality. City sanitation workers clearing debris at a western Silver Creek drainage site where industrial waste from nearby factories collected struggled with a heavy black trash bag caught under a grate. It felt unusually weighty, not like typical refuse. With colleagues, they hauled it ashore, slicing the thick plastic. A putrid, sour stench hit them, forcing them back. Inside weren't food scraps or factory waste, but decomposing human remains. Police arrived after the urgent call, sealing the area and barring reporters. Forensic teams in white hazmat suits worked under flashing lights, peeling back layers of trash bags. They confirmed these were parts of a female body, neatly dismembered, the cuts precise, likely from a sharp power saw. This wasn't an accident or a fall. It was clear evidence of deliberate murder. The news hit Cedar Falls like a thunderbolt. A community that prayed for Lena's temporary absence faced the brutal truth of her savage killing. That day, forensics sent the remains to the state lab. Urgent DNA tests, completed in a week, confirmed it was Lena Marie. The results ended her family's wait, but opened a painful, furious chapter in the investigation. The body was incomplete, missing critical parts like the skull and torso, preventing a definitive cause of death. Forensics noted the cuts on bone and tissue were mechanical, precise, made post-mortem or near death. Signs the killer was prepared, equipped with specialized tools, and calm enough to dismember in secrecy. For the Maries, it was a devastating blow. Lena's mother collapsed upon hearing the news. Her father sat motionless for hours, staring blankly out the window. Local media flooded with headlines. Lena Marie's body found in industrial trash. Mourners left prayers and flowers at the canal site. The sheriff, voice heavy, told the press, "We're treating this as a homicide. Anyone with any information, no matter how small, come forward. We won't stop until we find who's responsible." But investigators knew the path ahead was thorny. Evidence was scarce. Blood on the truck, scattered twine, and now partial remains in a trash bag. The killer was clever, dismembering to obscure the cause of death, and bold, discarding remains in fast-flowing water where industrial waste masked odors. In the weeks that followed, police scoured the canal and nearby dumps for missing body parts. But heavy snow and early floods made it nearly impossible. Each day, Iowa grew more haunted by the question, who could commit such a crime in a place known for church services, harvests, and county fairs? And why Lena, a young woman dreaming of helping others who never crossed anyone? In that darkness, suspicion grew toward the person closest to her, setting the stage for a relentless investigation spanning years. The discovery of Lena Marie's partial remains in an industrial trash bag officially classified the case as a homicide. But instead of providing clarity, it led investigators into a maze of suspicion and scant evidence. In the days following the DNA results, police zeroed in on one person, David Miller, Lena's boyfriend. David had been whispered about in the community since Lena's disappearance. His cold demeanor during the search efforts baffling many. Now, with the reality of Lena's murder confirmed, suspicion toward him grew heavier. At Black Hawk County Police Headquarters, David was called in for questioning. Investigators asked directly how long had their relationship been strained. David admitted they had argued mostly about Lena's plans to leave Iowa for physical therapy school in Cedar Falls. He claimed he feared she'd leave and never come back, but insisted those conflicts weren't a motive for murder. In the interrogation transcript, David appeared calm, even defiant, repeatedly citing his participation in the search as proof of his innocence. But for the police, that wasn't enough. They needed physical evidence, not just denials. Witnesses from the community were summoned. Some of Lena's close friends testified they had seen her and David argue heatedly, once even in the distribution center parking lot where she worked. A neighbor recalled hearing an argument from the pickup truck the night Lena vanished as it stopped near the road. These pieces tilted the case heavily toward David, but suspicion didn't equate to conviction. Investigators searched David's small Cedar Falls apartment, looking for any trace of blood or evidence linked to Lena. They seized clothing, a knife, and mud-caked boots. Yet, lab results yielded no conclusive evidence, no Lena's blood, no clear DNA to incriminate. The only lead was mixed DNA found in a latex glove and on the trash bag containing the remains. In 2005, DNA technology couldn't separate mixed samples, especially those degraded by water, mud, and industrial chemicals. The lab report stated curtly, "Sample contains multiple DNA sources, unable to identify specific individual." In a criminal case, this was as good as a blank slate. Investigators explored other possibilities, checking records of local convicts, cross-referencing co-workers from Lena's distribution center, even investigating long-haul truckers frequenting the canal area. All led nowhere. In the community, rumors spread. Some were convinced David killed Lena, unable to bear her leaving him. Others thought blaming a local was the police dodging a dangerous outsider still lurking. The town's atmosphere grew heavier. The Maries, grieving their daughter, repeatedly begged police to pressure David. Her father, in a local newspaper interview, said deliberately, "I believe my daughter's killer is still out there. I don't care who he is. I just want the truth." But the truth remained elusive. The Black Hawk County Sheriff, in a late 2005 press conference, admitted, "We have many suspicions, many theories, but no direct evidence to charge anyone." Those words doused the community's hopes like cold water. Early in 2006, after months of grappling with fragmented clues, Lena Marie's case was officially labeled a cold case. The Black Hawk County Sheriff's Office issued a brief statement to the press, emphasizing, "We've used all available resources, but found no direct evidence to charge anyone. The case will remain open and may be revisited with new technology or information." The cold words cut deeper into the Mary's pain and sown disappointment across Cedar Falls. The community, once united with hundreds of volunteers trudging through snow along the creek, had to accept their efforts were in vain. Press conferences, once packed with reporters, dwindled to a few familiar faces. Even they, admitting there was little new to report. In that atmosphere, Lena's parents shifted from panic to something more enduring: resolve. Her mother, after crying herself dry, began printing hundreds of flyers with Lena's photo and the words, "Who saw her?" on the night of October 5th. She handed them out at farmers' markets, posted them on church bulletin boards, and sent them to every shop in downtown Cedar Falls. Her father, more reserved and stoic, built a large wooden sign by the highway out of town, painted in bold red, "Justice for Lena." Each week he cleared snow from it to keep the words visible. For years that sign became a quiet symbol of a family refusing to surrender. But for most of the community, time was a cruel remedy. Months after the case went quiet, Lena's name faded from market conversations, replaced by talk of corn prices, harvests, or high school football. Search volunteers returned to daily life. Only a few kept lighting candles by the canal on the 5th of each month. Lena's name slipped into collective memory, a throbbing wound buried under Iowa's snow. For investigators, her case became an obsession. Some young officers involved in the search quit the force within years, frustrated by their powerlessness. Those who stayed occasionally reopened the file, reviewing crime scene photos and transcripts, but all led to dead ends. The DNA technology of the time couldn't separate mixed samples, and other evidence was too thin for a case. To experts, Lena's case was one of Cedar Falls's first to be labeled unsolved. That failure planted fear in the community. If a horrific case like this could go unresolved, how many more truths would be buried in the snow? Meanwhile, Lena's parents became reluctant investigators. They collected every rumor, met anyone claiming to have seen something odd that night. They contacted victim advocacy groups, wrote to Iowa senators, and sought national media attention. Occasionally, reporters from Des Moines or Davenport came, but after a brief article, they left, leaving the Marys alone again. On the first anniversary of Lena's disappearance, the family held a candlelight vigil in Cedar Falls's town square. Hundreds attended, candles burning brightly in the cold wind, praying together, but the crowd thinned the next year. By the third, only a few dozen remained. Cold, exhaustion, and futility wore people down. Only Lena's parents never gave up. In the years that followed, her mother kept distributing flyers at fairs and church meetings. Her father repainted the highway sign when its red faded under sun and rain. To them, Lena was still out there, and justice had to be claimed. But in the sheriff's cold storage, the case file gathered dust. Photos, forensic reports, and notes about mixed DNA, inseparable, haunted a generation of investigators. Lena Marie's case, the young woman with physical therapy dreams stolen, became Cedar Falls's first cold case, leaving a deep crack in the trust of a community that believed its home was safe and peaceful. From the moment Lena Marie's case was labeled a cold case in early 2006, time seemed to freeze in the Marys' small farmhouse. While the world outside kept turning, winter snow blanketed cornfields, spring planted seeds, and fall brought trucks loaded with crops. Only Lena's parents, Henry and Mary, lived in an inescapable loop, waking each day wondering why their daughter was taken so cruelly and falling into fitful sleep, hoping for a call with new leads. From 2006 to 2016, no breakthroughs emerged. Case reviews hit dead ends. Mixed DNA remained inseparable with the era's technology. Old witnesses couldn't recall details or offered nothing new. When the family pressed police, the response was always, "We're still monitoring, but there's no progress." To Henry and Mary, it was repeated torment. They aged visibly. Henry's hair turned white within years. His back hunched under grief's weight. Mary grew gaunt, her eyes perpetually red. On Lena's birthdays, they brought flowers to the Silver Creek Canal, where her truck was found. Early on, neighbors joined, bringing candles and flowers, but the numbers dwindled. By the 10th year, only the couple stood silently in the cold wind, laying flowers on hard ground, whispering her name. Cedar Falls and nearby towns, once shaken by the case, settled back into routine. Kids who went to school with Lena graduated, started families, had children. Posters with her radiant smile tore, blown apart by wind or blurred by rain. In the community's collective memory, Lena's story became an old tale mentioned occasionally at anniversaries, quickly overshadowed by newer news. Still, the Marys persisted as if it were survival. Mary regularly sent letters to local TV stations, hoping they'd rerun Lena's story. Each time reporters agreed and TV screen showed her face with a familiar text, "Unsolved case, please contact with any information." These reports revived pain, but also faint hope. On radio shows, Henry or Mary sometimes shared their trembling voices recounting familiar details. Who Lena was, how she vanished, and how the family still waited. Each broadcast prompted a few hotline calls. "I saw a girl like Lena in Davenport," or "I heard something in a bar." But police checks found only mirages or vague memories. This repetition made many in the community see the case as a lingering shadow, ever-present, haunting, but untouchable. For the Marys, those 10 years were exhausting. Grief didn't fade. It became a deep, unhealed scar. Some nights Mary woke with a racing heart, dreaming Lena knocked at the door. Henry sometimes drove to the canal at night, sitting hours in the cold dark, feeling closer to her last moments. They refused to sell the ranch or leave the old house, as if doing so would cut Lena's way back. From 2006 to 2016, Lena's case symbolized frustration in Iowa's investigative circles, cited in training as an example of early forensic technology's limits. But to Cedar Falls's people, it wasn't a scientific case. It was a wound in the community's heart. 10 years passed, and Lena remained forever 21 in her parents' and friends' memories. All they had was an abandoned truck, dried blood, a horrific trash bag, and an endless wait. After a decade of stagnation, Lena Marie's case gathered dust in Black Hawk County's archives. But in 2020, a new spark revived the seemingly forgotten case. The Iowa State Patrol announced a dedicated cold case unit, a move to restore community trust shaken by decades of unsolved cases. The small but experienced unit included retired investigators as consultants and young officers skilled in modern technology. Their goal: review every dormant case, especially those with preserved physical evidence suitable for advanced DNA analysis. Among hundreds of stacked files, Lena Marie's name stood out. Investigators noted the case for its community impact and a rare advantage: well-preserved evidence. The industrial trash bag with partial remains, a latex glove found inside out in the drainage grate, and duct tape-covered fabric, all remained in cold storage, carefully sealed. In 2005, these were nearly useless. In 2020, they were an opportunity. A press conference at Iowa State Patrol's Cedar Falls headquarters featured the unit's captain, who spoke briefly, but firmly, "We know the community has waited too long. It's time to use technology to bring justice for victims like Lena Marie." The words brought tears to the Maries, now elderly, in front of TV cameras. Police retrieved all related evidence, transferring sealed boxes to the state lab under strict oversight. For the first time in years, Lena's name appeared on forensic analysis reports. Technicians opened the sealed glove using touch DNA techniques to extract tiny skin cells left on surfaces. They also reprocessed the duct tape known to retain microscopic skin or hair traces. Unlike 2005, the difference was stark where once results read, "mixed, unidentifiable." Modern equipment painted a clearer picture. Yet, it wasn't enough. Initial results confirmed Lena's DNA in the glove. Unsurprising, likely from blood or tissue, but also at least one other source, possibly the killer's. The problem, while clearer, the DNA wasn't clean enough for a direct Cody's match with the FBI's database. It was like a distorted song. The melody audible, but missing notes to confirm the tune. Investigators knew they were closer, but still distant. For the Maries, this was a major step. For the first time in 15 years, they heard DNA and potential to trace the killer in one sentence. Hope flickered. Iowa media covered it extensively, revisiting the case, interviewing old neighbors and co-workers. Aged faces and faded memories resurfaced on camera. Some expressed joy. At least the police haven't forgotten Lena. Others were skeptical, seeing it as a political move for voter trust. Regardless, the door to justice, once slammed shut, cracked open slightly. In the following months, the cold case unit sent samples to labs specializing in mixed DNA, even contacting California firms known for genealogical tracing. They knew the initial results, though insufficient, were a foundation. One winter evening in 2020, as snow blanketed Cedar Falls, Mary stood by the farmhouse's window, staring into the dark, whispering to Henry, "Maybe this time we'll know the truth." It wasn't a statement, but a fragile hope after 15 draining years. That hope, and the persistence of those who refused to let go, kept Lena's story alive. 4 years later, in the summer of 2024, Iowa faced its worst drought in decades. Scorching heat, rare rain, and the Silver Creek Canal, once swollen with seasonal floods, dropped to record lows. The dry riverbed exposed cracked black mud untouched for years. Locals used to a full canal were stunned by the barren stones, roots, and trapped debris. In that setting, a chilling discovery was reported. On August 15, 2024, a father and son fishing near a northern Cedar Falls drainage site waded into the canal to set up a tent. The boy shouted, spotting a black object in the dried mud. The father pulled it out. A large industrial trash bag torn in places, nylon threads exposed. A foul stench forced them to cover their noses. Recalling the old case, the father called police without opening it further. When investigators arrived, they cordoned off the area, blocking curious onlookers. The bag was placed on a white tarp, and forensics carefully cut it open. Inside were not human remains like before, but seemingly innocuous items. A grey-green fabric scrap from a common factory work shirt and industrial duct tape caked with mud. This immediately caught the Iowa Cold Case Unit's attention, matching the old case. Lena wore a work uniform the night she vanished, and the 2005 bag had duct tape used to wrap her remains. Despite nearly 2 decades, the fabric and tape retained some microscopic cells. Forensics experts were thrilled at this rare chance, noting that mud and thick plastic could preserve DNA. The evidence was sealed and sent to a cutting-edge California lab known for handling trace and mixed DNA. News of the second trash bag rocked Iowa. Local headlines blared. Drought reveals new evidence in Lena Marie case. Images of police carrying the rotted bag aired on evening news, reigniting memories of the once cold case. Radio shows featured forensic experts explaining why the fabric and tape could be pivotal. Locals talked in supermarkets, churches, and high school bleachers. Could this be when justice is finally served? For the Maries, the news was both painful and hopeful. Henry, now in his 70s, trembled, holding a newspaper with the bag's photo, telling reporters, "I thought I'd die without knowing what happened. Maybe God left us a chance." Mary, Frylier, nodded, her eyes wet with tears. The cold case investigators quickly recognized the significance of this discovery. One of them, Lieutenant Sarah Jenkins, said during an internal meeting, "We've been waiting for this chance for nearly 20 years. If the sample still has enough DNA, we can isolate and match it, something we couldn't do in 2005. They immediately partnered with private labs specializing in genealogical DNA analysis. While awaiting results, police re-examined the Silver Creek Canal area, organizing an expanded search. They dug through additional mud patches, recovering a few more plastic bag fragments, but all were too degraded to be useful. The trash bag containing the fabric and duct tape remained the only evidence with viable DNA potential. At that time, technology had far surpassed what was available 2 decades earlier. Next-generation sequencing allowed reading tiny DNA fragments, even analyzing mixed sources. Inside the industrial duct tape, technicians found residual skin cells, the kind of invisible trace left when someone touches a surface. It was a critical clue. Weeks later, a preliminary report from California arrived in Iowa. The bolded text made investigators hold their breath. Foreign DNA distinct from the victim detected on the duct tape. The sample is suitable for further genealogical analysis. At that, the cold case team nearly erupted with relief. After 19 years, they had a usable DNA sample from a suspect for the first time. The news was kept confidential to avoid leaks. But the report's contents reached the Marie family. Upon hearing it, Henry sank into a chair, sobbing like a child. Mary gripped her husband's hand, whispering, "Our girl will have justice." From that moment, the investigation, stagnant for years, roared back to life. A rotted trash bag, exposed by a brutal drought, had brought Iowa its final chance to uncover the truth about the fateful night Lena vanished. With increasingly powerful genetic genealogy technology, investigators believed the killer had nowhere left to hide. When the preliminary report from the California lab confirmed foreign DNA on the industrial duct tape, Iowa's cold case unit knew they were at the most pivotal moment in nearly 2 decades. Instead of just matching against Cody's as in the 2000s, they chose a bold new approach, genetic genealogy, a technology that had gained fame for cracking long-dormant cases across the U.S. in the past decade. The DNA sample was packed in a specialized container, transported by air under constant supervision by 2 officers. It was sent to a renowned California lab specializing in reconstructing genetic profiles from heavily degraded samples. There, experts isolated the sample, sequenced millions of tiny gene fragments, and compared them to public genetic databases, repositories where people voluntarily submit DNA for ancestry testing. The process was like assembling a massive jigsaw puzzle. Technicians didn't expect a perfect match, as the killer likely never submitted DNA to any site. Instead, they sought partial matches, distant relatives, 3rd or 4th cousins to build a family tree. This required meticulous work. Every data point, every match index was analyzed, documented, and linked to civil records, birth certificates, marriages, and deaths. After weeks, results emerged. The DNA on the duct tape clearly tied to a Miller lineage from Warren County, Iowa, a small county hundreds of miles southeast of Cedar Falls. This lineage traced back to German families who settled in Iowa in the late 19th century, with descendants still living in the region by the early 21st century. Genealogists constructed a sprawling chart from the first Miller couple in Iowa in 1890, branching to hundreds of descendants by eliminating the deceased, those outside the age range or women not matching the male genetic profile. The list narrowed. Ultimately, all arrows pointed to a familiar name from the old case, David Miller, Lena's boyfriend, the focus of suspicion. In 2005, when the California report arrived, Lieutenant Sarah Jenkins went still. She recalled the old transcripts, David's interrogations, his cold denials, witnesses reporting arguments. Back then, no direct evidence or technology existed to convict. Now, nearly 20 years later, technology had done what humans couldn't. The killer's DNA, clinging to the duct tape through rain and snow, through the rot of a trash bag, pointed to one man. The findings were reported to Iowa State Patrol commanders. A closed-door meeting in Cedar Falls included prosecutors, forensic experts, and veteran investigators from the case's early days. Many sighed, relieved yet bitter. Their suspicions from years ago were right, but the times hadn't allowed proof. A prosecutor stated bluntly, "We don't just have a name. We have a family tree proving the bloodline leading straight to David." Yet turning genealogy data into courtroom evidence required one more step: direct confirmation. Investigators were dispatched to quietly monitor David, now in his 40s, living in Iowa City, Iowa. He worked as a forklift driver at a produce warehouse, living with his wife and 2 young children in a quiet suburb. To neighbors, David was reserved, private, untroublesome, seemingly having left his Cedar Falls past behind. The surveillance team sought to collect a direct DNA sample for comparison. One morning, as the garbage truck passed through the neighborhood, they retrieved beer cans, cigarette butts, and a toothbrush from the Miller household's trash. These items were sent to the state lab, where experts compared them to the 2005 duct tape DNA. The results were chillingly clear: a perfect match. No longer a theory or distant genealogy, it was direct proof that David Miller's DNA matched the evidence tied to Lena's remains. When the report landed on the sheriff's desk, the room fell silent. Some veteran officers clenched their fists, eyes welling up. They'd waited 19 years for this day. A young investigator whispered, "Finally, Lena will have justice." But the discovery also sent shock waves. How could a man live quietly for nearly 2 decades with a family and job while hiding such a dark past? What kept him from confessing even as suspicion surrounded him in 2005? And how did the DNA evidence, defiant through time, become the sole betrayer? Iowa media knew nothing yet, but within the investigation, everyone understood they were nearing the end of a case that haunted a community. The mud-caked duct tape pulled from a rotted trash bag in a drought-stricken canal had become a silent witness accusing the killer. When the California lab's report pinpointed the Miller lineage in Warren County, Iowa, investigators knew they were close to the truth. But turning genetic genealogy into legally binding evidence required a direct DNA sample from the suspect. The name mentioned most was still David Miller. The man questioned in 2005, now living quietly in Iowa City, working at a produce warehouse with a wife and 2 children. A closed-door meeting was held in Cedar Falls. The prosecutor stressed, "If we want an arrest warrant, we need an absolute match. Not a hypothesis, not distant genealogy, but a one-to-one comparison." The fastest way was a trash pull, obtaining a warrant to collect the suspect's discarded trash. A method courts often approved since curbside garbage is considered abandoned property. On the night of September 10, 2024, a team of plainclothes officers staked out the suburb where the Millers lived. The quiet neighborhood had white-painted houses, neat wooden fences, and distant dog barks. Unbeknownst to residents, unmarked police cars waited in the shadows. When the city garbage truck rolled through, officers followed, isolating the Miller household's trash and transferring it to a sealed vehicle. In the trash, they found everyday items: pizza boxes, cereal cartons, candy wrappers, but the key was items likely to carry DNA. Beer cans with saliva traces, a worn toothbrush, and an old razor blade. All were sealed, meticulously documented, and sent to the state lab. The days awaiting results were the most tense for the cold case team. Lieutenant Sarah Jenkins barely slept. She'd followed this case since the unit's inception, knowing a match could close the circle of justice for Lena. The Maries, though not fully informed, sensed a shift. Henry said in a brief interview, "I see them busier, quieter. Maybe this time there's real hope." Then the awaited day arrived. The lab report confirmed DNA from the toothbrush and beer cans matched perfectly with the DNA on the 2005 latex glove and duct tape tied to Lena's remains. No room for doubt. The statistical chance of a random match was less than 1 in a trillion. In other words, this was the killer's biological signature. When the report was read in the meeting room, the air grew heavy. Some veteran investigators slumped in their chairs, heads in hands, tears falling. They'd lived with failure for nearly 20 years. And now, from a few discarded beer cans, the truth emerged. Jenkins clutched the case file, voice trembling. "We've got it. Finally, Lena will have her justice." This breakthrough reshaped the entire case strategy. The prosecutor ordered immediate preparation for an arrest warrant. Investigators reviewed the evidence chain: the truck abandoned by the canal, dried blood, baling twine, the trash bag with remains, and now the perfectly matched DNA from the suspect. It formed an undeniable picture. But alongside the excitement was unease. Some older officers recalled the early investigation. They'd suspected David, searched his apartment, but found nothing. Back then, technology and evidence weren't enough. Had 2005 had today's tools, the Maries might not have endured nearly 20 years of waiting. The DNA results were kept secret, known only to the investigation team and prosecutor's office. Yet, in Iowa City, rumors stirred. Residents noticed unfamiliar cars around the Miller neighborhood. Some reporters sensed a story, but held off publishing. The Maries were called to the prosecutor's office for a private briefing. Upon hearing "perfect match," Henry broke down, shoulders shaking, while Mary covered her face, whispering, "Baby, we finally have this day." The story begun with a trash bag pulled from the Silver Creek in 2005, closed with another, discarded by David Miller in 2024. It was a fateful match, as if justice had patiently waited, clinging to skin cells and saliva to appear at the right time in the right place. To the Maries, it wasn't just scientific evidence, but proof their daughter was never forgotten. In the darkness of nearly 2 decades, Lena had been silent, but the killer's traces endured, as persistent as Iowa's own land and sky. Now they spoke, pointing directly to the man suspected but unconvicted years ago. This time there was no escape. With a perfectly matched DNA from David Miller's discarded trash, Iowa's cold case unit knew they needed to bolster the evidence chain to ensure an unassailable prosecution. A case spanning nearly 20 years carried risks, and any defense attorney would try to sow doubt. So, the team revisited every seemingly minor detail in the old case file, hoping for additional pieces. They weren't disappointed. In Black Hawk County's evidence storage, a hard drive and electronic components seized from David's old pickup truck in 2005 remained. Back then, GPS data recovery was rudimentary, and police couldn't extract anything. Now with modern software, digital technicians successfully recovered the vehicle's movement log from October 2005. The data revealed a chilling detail. On the night of October 5th, between 9:50 and 10:25 p.m., David's truck stopped for over 30 minutes near the Silver Creek's drainage site, where weeks later, the trash bag with Lena's remains was found. The map displayed on screen, a blinking red, was undeniable proof of David's presence at the scene on that fateful night. Alongside this, another investigative team reviewed David's financial records from the time of Lena's disappearance. With the bank's cooperation, they uncovered credit card transactions at a Cedar Falls hardware store. 2 days before Lena vanished, David purchased a 50-pack of large black industrial trash bags and 2 bottles of strong odor-eliminating bleach. These items, in the context of a young woman dismembered and hidden in an industrial trash bag, made the connection glaringly obvious. In 2005, this detail was dismissed as coincidental, as nothing proved the trash bag at the scene was the kind he bought. But now, with DNA and GPS tying David to the case, the purchase receipt became a critical link in the chain of reasoning. The next decisive blow came from David's old workplace. In 2005, he worked as a maintenance worker at an agricultural equipment shop. Investigator Sarah Jenkins decided to revisit the shop, tracking down David's former co-workers. Though nearly 2 decades had passed, their memories lingered. A manager recalled that during the week Lena disappeared, the shop reported a missing reciprocating saw, commonly called a sawzall. The saw was never found, and the loss was noted only briefly before being buried in paperwork. At the time, police couldn't connect the missing saw to the case due to insufficient evidence. But now, with the clean cuts on Lena's remains described by forensics years ago, the mysterious disappearance of the sawzall became a perfect puzzle piece. These new details, GPS data pinpointing the location, receipts for trash bags and bleach, and the missing saw from David's workplace, formed a tight noose around the suspect. The picture of the night Lena vanished grew clearer. An argument erupted. David killed his girlfriend, used a saw to dismember her, bought trash bags and bleach to dispose of the body, and drove to the Silver Creek to dump the remains. Everything aligned with objective data. When the comprehensive report reached the prosecutor's office, the prosecutor stood abruptly. "We have everything: DNA, location, physical evidence, financial records, and an indirect murder weapon. This case is undeniable." The room's atmosphere was tense but filled with resolve. Veteran investigators, haunted by guilt for 19 years, felt a measure of release. One whispered, "We let him slip away too long." Not anymore. Meanwhile, in Iowa City, David continued his seemingly normal life, driving to work each morning, eating dinner with his family. Neighbors described him as a quiet man who rarely joined community gatherings. No one knew that the beer cans he discarded, the old toothbrush, and now the GPS history and purchase receipts were silently turning into damning evidence. For the Marie family, the new details revealed in a private meeting at the prosecutor's office left them stunned. When Henry heard the GPS showed David's truck stopped at the canal the night their daughter disappeared, he slumped over the table, hands trembling. Mary cried quietly, whispering, "God didn't let him escape." To them, each piece of evidence wasn't just data, but a painful slice of Lena's final hours. The evidence chain was now airtight. From bloodstains, baling twine, the trash bag, the glove, DNA to GPS receipts, and the missing sawzall, all locked into an unyielding noose around David Miller. Justice, frozen for nearly 2 decades, finally took clear shape. As the physical evidence tightened around David Miller, Iowa's cold case unit knew they couldn't rely solely on DNA, GPS, and receipts. A rock-solid prosecution needed human elements. Witnesses who knew Lena, saw, heard, or sensed what happened before that fateful night. So investigators revisited the entire list of witnesses interviewed in 2005. Thick handwritten transcripts and old audio recordings were brought out again under the light of the present. What stunned them was how many statements from years ago were overlooked or not pursued deeply, partly due to lack of supporting evidence and partly because technology at the time couldn't connect the dots. Now, with DNA and GPS as a foundation, those seemingly trivial accounts became razor-sharp. They started with neighbors near the Marie home. A woman, now in her 60s, had vaguely reported hearing an argument from the dirt road leading to the canal on the night of October 5, 2005. Back then, she thought it was just a typical lover's spat, didn't confirm details, and police didn't press further. Re-interviewed now, her memory sharpened. A man's voice shouting, a woman's voice choking, then a car door slamming. I'm sure it was Lena's voice. I heard her grow up. I'd know it, she said, eyes welling with tears. Another neighbor, a college student at the time, recalled glimpsing the Mary's green pickup parked by the road that night with two figures arguing intensely inside. He didn't stop, assuming it was a personal matter. In 2005, his statement was dismissed for lack of detail. But now, with GPS confirming David's truck at the canal at that exact time, his fleeting observation became a perfectly fitting piece. Not just neighbors, Lena's close friends were recalled. Many, now with families across Iowa, returned to Cedar Falls to recount buried memories when they heard the case reopened. A co-worker from Lena's shift said that a week before her disappearance, Lena confided she wanted to end things with David definitively. She told me it was time to break free, to leave Iowa for physical therapy school. She wanted a new life, the friend said, eyes glistening. In 2005, this was noted but dismissed as typical relationship friction due to lack of evidence. Now, it was a clear motive. David couldn't accept being left. Another friend recalled that at a birthday party days earlier, Lena quietly asked, "If I move to Cedar Falls for school, do you think I'll be okay?" The question stunned them, knowing David's possessiveness. He often showed up at her workplace to check on her, calling constantly to ask where she was, who she was with. He controlled her to the point of suffocation, the friend said, voice breaking. These buried memories pieced together painted a tragic picture. A young woman trying to escape a stifling relationship, a man obsessed with control, and a final night turning into murder. Investigators also tracked down David's old co-workers at the agricultural equipment shop. A foreman recalled David acting unusually tense that week, arriving late, eyes dark with fatigue, once leaving early for family issues. Asked about the missing sawzall, the foreman admitted, "We knew who used it last, but there was no proof then. Now I believe it all fits." All these statements were recorded, filmed, and added to the case file. The prosecutor, reading the compiled report, emphasized, "We don't just have physical evidence. We have the community's accounts, and they're so consistent they can't be dismissed." For the Marys, hearing these accounts was agonizing. Mary sobbed hearing a neighbor confirm recognizing Lena's voice in her final night. Henry gripped his wife's hand, face contorted. They should have believed it in 2005, but better late than never. When the full picture was assembled, the truth was undeniable. David Miller argued with Lena in the truck on October 5th. Couldn't accept her leaving him and killed her. Then he calmly hid the crime for nearly 2 decades, building a new family life as if the past never existed. But forgotten testimonies, revived and cross-referenced with modern technology, became echoes that couldn't be silenced. Iowa's cold case unit knew that with this robust evidence chain, from DNA, GPS, receipts, the missing saw to witness accounts, they had an ironclad case. This time, no one could ignore it. No detail overlooked. Lena Marie was finally heard through the voices silenced 20 years ago. With a perfectly matched DNA from the trash pull and reconnected witness accounts, Iowa investigators knew they had enough to secure a search warrant for David Miller's home. This step wasn't just to gather more evidence, but to prove the chain extended beyond hypothesis into the deepest layers, where the suspect kept his private life and secrets he didn't want exposed. The warrant was approved after closed-door meetings between prosecutors and the cold case unit. On a May morning in 2024, a convoy of unmarked police cars quietly entered the peaceful Iowa City neighborhood where the Millers lived. The two-story house with a neatly trimmed lawn looked like any other in the area. When the door opened, David's wife and two young children were stunned as dozens of officers entered, reading the search warrant. David sat frozen in a chair, face ashen, eyes vacant. Gone was his usual cool demeanor. He stammered, "I didn't do anything," but his voice trembled. The forensic team searched every room. The basement, filled with cardboard boxes and old tools, drew particular attention. On a raincoat rack, they found a worn grey jacket with faint stains. To the naked eye, it seemed unremarkable, but under a forensic light, it revealed microscopic blue and grey fibers. Technicians immediately seized and sealed it for analysis. Results later confirmed the fibers matched those found on the duct tape in the trash bag with Lena's remains. This was physical evidence directly linking David to the crime scene. In a small second-floor office, police found an old leather-bound notebook tucked among paper scraps. Flipping through, investigators were stunned. It contained scribbled diagrams of the Silver Creek's flow and its drainage branches. Some areas were circled in red ink marked Deep Zone, Fast Current, and Iron Grate. These notes nearly matched the location where the trash bag with Lena's remains was found in 2005. On another page, a hastily scrawled line, Night of 5th. No traces left. The notebook was deemed golden evidence. A prosecutor remarked, "We have DNA, GPS, receipts, witnesses. Now we have his own notes on how to dispose of the body. This isn't coincidence. It's calculation." In the garage, investigators found an old toolbox containing rusty saw blades, some used at the agricultural equipment shop where David worked. Though the 2005 saw was gone, the presence of similar blades suggested he kept tools related to it. They seized them for analysis. As police worked, neighbors gathered outside, buzzing with talk. Many couldn't believe the quiet man who mowed his lawn every weekend was tied to such a heinous crime. A woman whispered, "I remember when police asked about David after Lena disappeared, but no one thought he could do it." Now her words trailed off, her eyes fearful. During questioning post-search, David insisted the notebook was random fishing notes and the jacket worn for years. No idea why strange fibers were there. But investigators knew these weak defenses couldn't stand against the tightening evidence chain. For the Maries, hearing about the notebook and jacket was both horrifying and relieving. Henry, rarely emotional, broke down. He wrote it down. God, he wrote it down. Mary held his hand, whispering, "Lena's finally speaking through what he left behind." In the case file, the search findings became a pivotal piece. They not only confirmed David's link to the scene, but showed premeditation, a key for first-degree murder charges. The prosecutor concluded, this wasn't an impulsive act of rage. It was planned, hidden, and maintained for nearly 2 decades. And now his own scribbled notes have betrayed him. With the evidence assembled, the full picture emerged. A toxic relationship, an argument leading to death, a meticulous disposal plan, and a killer living calmly among the community for years. Details missed in 2005 returned stronger than ever. With what was found in the Iowa City house, the noose of justice closed tightly around David Miller with no way out. After the undeniable evidence from the home search, Iowa State Patrol and the Black Hawk County Prosecutor's Office decided it was time to act. An arrest warrant was officially signed by the court in early August 2024. For investigators, this was a long-awaited yet heavy moment. They were about to arrest the man they believed killed Lena Marie nearly 20 years ago. But they also knew that to Iowa City's community, David Miller had been a quiet, working family man living with his wife and 2 young children in a peaceful neighborhood. On August 15th, before the sun rose high, a team of plainclothes officers quietly approached the agricultural distribution warehouse where David worked as a forklift driver. The morning air at the industrial park was calm, with the sounds of trucks backing up mixing with signal horns. David, as usual, wore a blue work uniform, stepping out from the break room with a steaming coffee, unaware that minutes later his life would take an irreversible turn. As David climbed into the forklift seat, 4 officers swiftly approached. One flashed a badge, stating clearly, "David Miller, you're under arrest for first-degree murder in the death of Lena Marie in 2005. The warehouse fell silent. Co-workers stopped, eyes wide. Some gasped in disbelief. "David! No way!" David's face paled, his coffee cup crashing to the ground. But he didn't resist. Hands cuffed behind his back, he stared down, lips tight, as distant reporters' cameras captured the moment. News spread like wildfire. Within an hour, Iowa's major papers ran headlines. 20-year cold case solved. Arrest in Iowa City. Local TV looped footage of police escorting the suspect from the warehouse with commentary. The man described as quiet and reserved now faces charges for a brutal murder. In the Miller neighborhood, shock rippled. Neighbors gathered on lawns, stunned as police taped off the 2-story White House. A woman trembled, telling a reporter, "I remember him helping me shovel snow in winter. I can't believe he's tied to this horrific thing." Another said, "He was quiet, never caused trouble, but maybe there was another side we never saw." David's wife, devastated, collapsed in tears as police took him away. Neighbors whisked their 2 children inside to shield them from camera flashes. The scene stirred pity, but sympathy quickly gave way to anger. 4 years, the killer had lived among them, eating dinner in peaceful homes, attending church, while the Marys grappled with unresolved pain. The Marie family, upon receiving the call from the sheriff, nearly broke into tears immediately. Henry could only muster 2 words. "Thank you," Mary whispered. "Baby, you finally have justice." They drove to Cedar Falls that afternoon to meet the investigative team, bringing an old photo of Lena placed on the meeting table like a silent witness to this historic moment. National media quickly picked up the story. CNN, NBC, and CBS aired special reports. Iowa 20-year cold case cracked with DNA and genetic genealogy. Reporters described it as one of the rare cold cases reaching a convincing conclusion through the blend of modern technology and the investigators' relentless determination. In Iowa City, the atmosphere remained heavy for days. At the local church, the pastor said during Sunday service, "We pray for the innocent affected and seek justice for Lena, a young woman whose dreams were never realized." Many shed tears, though some eyes burned with anger. For investigators, this was the turning point they'd awaited for years. But they knew the journey wasn't over. David was arrested, but ahead lay months of court battles, arguments, and the pain of reliving evidence, images, and testimonies. Yet, in that sweltering August 2024 morning, when handcuffs locked around David Miller's wrists, Iowa's community could breathe a sigh of relief. Justice had finally arrived, and Iowa City's darkest secret was exposed. Following David Miller's arrest in Iowa City, the Black Hawk County Prosecutor's Office and Iowa State Patrol held a major press conference in Cedar Falls. The room was packed with reporters, TV cameras, and curious residents crowding outside. After nearly 20 years, the community finally heard what investigators had quietly amassed, an irrefutable chain of evidence. On the podium, the sheriff stood beside the prosecutor, voice heavy. "We've arrested David Miller for first-degree murder in the 2005 death of Lena Marie. This is the result of tireless persistence and remarkable advances in forensic science. He listed each piece of evidence: foreign DNA on the duct tape matching David's personal items, restored GPS data from the pickup truck, proving his presence at the Silver Creek the night Lena vanished, credit card receipts for industrial trash bags and bleach, the mysterious disappearance of the Sawzall from his workplace, and the notebook with eerie notes mapping the drainage system. Each detail landed like a hammer, nailing shut the coffin of lies David had hidden for 2 decades. After the police statement, the Maries were invited to speak. Henry, now white-haired, stood trembling at the podium, clutching Lena's old photo. Choking up, he said, "We've waited nearly 20 years for this moment. It hurts that our daughter can't come back, but we're relieved the truth is finally out." Mary, wiping tears, added, "Without technology, our girl's case might have been forgotten forever. We thank those who never gave up. Lena deserves this justice." The room fell silent for a moment. Then applause erupted, not just from reporters, but from residents in attendance. It wasn't joyous applause, but one of a community finally unburdened. Post-conference, major newspapers ran detailed stories. The Cedar Falls Gazette headlined, "DNA, GPS, and eerie notes, the net tightens on Miller." The Des Moines Register published an editorial, "Justice delayed but not denied." National TV replayed the developments, sparking debates about genetic genealogy's power in criminal investigation. In Cedar Falls's community, Lena's memory surged back. At church, the pastor dedicated a Sunday service to the young woman, recalling her radiant smile and unfulfilled physical therapy dream. Old friends, now parents, shared faded school photos with Lena on social media, captioned, "We never forgot you." At the farmers' market, where missing posters once hung, new ones appeared. "Justice for Lena." 2005 to 2024. Police released a short video showing the seizure of the fiber-stained jacket and scribbled notebook. The images spread across newscasts, chilling viewers. TV analysts, including criminal psychologists, noted the notebook's notes revealed an obsessive, calculated mind, not a spur-of-the-moment rage. "This was a plan," one expert asserted. Despite the strong evidence, David's defense attorney tried sowing doubt in media interviews. "We will challenge the legality of the trash pool DNA collection and fight for our clients' rights." But most of the public remained unconvinced, believing justice stood with Lena, and the evidence was too clear to deny. The Maries returned to their small farmhouse. After the press conference, in the living room, Lena's photo was placed centrally, surrounded by fresh flowers and neighbors' condolence cards. Mary gazed at it, whispering, "You're gone, but never from our hearts." Henry, hands still trembling, told a visiting reporter, "I think this community just exhaled too. We don't have to live with an unanswered question anymore." In many Cedar Falls homes that night, Lena's name resurfaced at dinner tables, a topic silent for years. The 21-year-old, once fading into obscurity, was remembered with love and regret. Above all, the truth of her death was finally laid bare, delivering justice. Late, but no less vital. After the evidence press conference, Iowa entered the next tense phase, a preliminary hearing to determine what evidence could be presented to a jury. This critical step saw David Miller's defense team attempt to suppress the strongest evidence to weaken the prosecution's case. From the outset, David's lawyers filed multiple motions targeting 2 key pillars, the genetic genealogy data and the trash pool DNA. "Police violated our client's privacy by using genetic data from commercial testing databases," one attorney declared firmly. No Miller family member consented to their DNA being used for criminal investigation. On the trash pool, they argued collecting David's garbage without family notification was a blatant Fourth Amendment violation, protecting against unlawful searches and seizures. In the packed courtroom, arguments grew heated. The prosecutor stood, countering, The Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled garbage placed curbside is no longer private property, and using genetic genealogy data voluntarily provided to public databases doesn't infringe on individual rights. He added, "It's not just DNA. We have restored GPS, receipts for trash bags and bleach, the missing saw, all witness testimonies, and a notebook with notes. This chain is too tight to be dismissed on a technicality." The judge, perched high, listened, occasionally interjecting. "Counsel for the defense, can you explain why data voluntarily submitted to testing databases by Miller relatives can't be referenced by police? Or if the trash was in a public access curb, how do you define privacy?" These questions left the defense stumbling. In the audience, the Marys sat clutching hands. Mary teared up as David's lawyer called genetic genealogy an unprecedented invasion. To her, these arguments felt alien. Her daughter died in agony, and justice couldn't be delayed further. Henry stared at the judge's bench as if one Nord could answer nearly 20 years of waiting. Legal experts as witnesses played a key role. A University of Iowa law professor explained, "Courts in multiple states have upheld genetic genealogy in investigations, provided court approval precedes detailed data access, which Iowa State Patrol followed." A former federal judge testified, "Legal precedent clearly favors the prosecution." The hearing stretched over days, tense like a mini-trial. Media covered every argument. Evening news detailing each exchange. Iowa's community split. Some worried about privacy breaches, but most supported using every tool to bring the killer to justice. Finally, the judge delivered the ruling. In the packed room, all held their breath. The gavel struck, the voice clear. The court denies the motion to exclude the trash pool DNA evidence. The court also permits the use of genetic genealogy data as a legally approved investigative step. All listed evidence may be presented to the jury. The room erupted, murmurs, sighs of relief. Henry tightly embraced his wife, tears streaming. Investigators exchanged relieved glances. The path to trial was clear. David's defense team, faces grim, knew their biggest effort to shake the case had failed. News spread across the state. Headlines blared, "Iowa judge, DNA and genetic genealogy admissible in Miller trial." TV analysts noted this could be a landmark case, paving the way for other cold cases solved with new DNA tech. For the Marys, it was the final step before the trial they both dreaded and longed for. Justice was no longer a distant concept, but within reach, ready to unveil a truth buried for nearly 2 decades. After the preliminary hearings ruling, Lena Marie's case officially moved to trial. The opening was set for late November 2024 at the Black Hawk County Courthouse in Cedar Falls. Tension gripped Iowa. Local papers counted down the days. National TV sent reporters to Cedar Falls, and the community anxiously awaited whether justice would finally close this 2-decade saga. On the trial's opening day, the courthouse was packed. Outside, dozens stood in the early winter chill, watching on live screens. Inside, David Miller sat at the defense table in a dark suit arranged by his lawyers, face pale, eyes fixed downward, avoiding all gazes. Across the room, the Marys sat quietly, Lena's portrait photo on Mary's lap, a silent witness alongside them. The prosecutor began with a calm but chilling opening. 20 years ago, a young woman with dreams of becoming a physical therapist was brutally robbed of her life. The killer thought he could hide it with industrial trash bags, a saw, and silence. But justice never vanishes. It waits for its moment to speak. The words silenced the jury, and the Marys wept. The prosecution called its first witness, the California Lab's DNA expert. He explained genetic genealogy clearly to the jury, detailing how trace DNA was isolated from the duct tape and how a family tree led to the Millers. He projected an enlarged DNA graph and genealogy chart, crossing off names until only David remained. The chance of a random match, he concluded, is less than 1 in a trillion. In other words, no one else but David Miller. Next, the prosecution presented the physical evidence chain, restored GPS from the truck, showing David stopped at the site where the trash bag was found, receipts for industrial trash bags and bleach matching the timing, the missing sawzall from the shop, the grey jacket with fibres matching the duct tape, and the notebook with drainage system sketches. All formed a detailed timeline from Lena's shift ending on October 5, 2005, to the discovery of her remains weeks later. Each point was backed by images, documents, and witnesses, making the full picture crystal clear. A striking witness was the neighbor who heard the argument that night. She stood at the stand, voice trembling. "I heard her voice. It was Lena's. I'm certain." At that, Mary slumped into her husband's shoulder, sobbing. A close friend of Lena testified that Lena had planned to end things with David and leave for physical therapy school. She was ready for a new life, the friend said, choking up, but she never got the chance. The Marys also took the stand. Henry, handshaking, held Lena's photo before the jury, recounting years of hopeless waiting, empty birthdays, and 19 years of placing flowers by the Silver Creek. Mary whispered, "Every night I prayed she'd knock on the door. Instead, we got a trash bag." Many in the courtroom cried, even some jurors wiping their eyes. The prosecution deftly blended cold scientific evidence with the emotional weight of witness accounts. Their strategy was clear. Not only prove David's guilt, but etch into the jury's minds the image of a young woman robbed of a future, a shattered family, and a community in the dark for nearly 2 decades. Black Hawk's sheriff, who spoke at the evidence press conference, addressed the crowd. Looking at the Marys, he said, "Justice can be slow. Sometimes so slow it feels hopeless, but science never misses, and this community's persistence never fades." Lena was heard, and Iowa learned a costly lesson. No case is too old to ignore. His words, quoted across state media, became a message for families awaiting answers in other cold cases. Henry and Mary spoke briefly. Henry's voice. "We lived in darkness for 2 decades. Today, light has returned, not just for our family, but for this community. Lena's gone, but her memory lives on." Mary, tears streaming, added, "If I have one message, it's that no one should endure violence in a relationship. If you feel controlled or threatened, seek help. Leave before it's too late." Lena didn't have that chance, but other girls do. Their message spread quickly. Iowa nonprofits launched campaigns raising awareness about intimate partner violence. Local high schools held workshops for students, with experts discussing signs of control and how to seek help. Some churches opened hotlines for women in danger. On social media, #JusticeForLena trended, symbolizing unity and warning. For Cedar Falls' community, the case's aftermath wasn't just about the crime's horror, but how it reshaped their perspective. People grew more attentive to once private matters. Couples arguing in parking lots, women silently enduring, children growing up in tense homes. "I'll never dismiss those signs again," a neighbor said at the vigil. As night fell, hundreds of candles still burned by the creek, their golden light reflecting on the water. The bench honoring Lena stood central, surrounded by flowers, cards, and old photos. A boy placed a small teddy bear, whispering, "I never met you, but I know you were brave." For Iowa, Lena Marie's case closed on paper, but opened a new chapter in community consciousness, one of vigilance, persistence, and science's power. By the Silver Creek, the wooden bench quietly awaited visitors, a reminder that justice, though late, never fades. The story of Lena Marie, a young Cedar Falls, Iowa woman killed by her boyfriend and disposed of in an industrial trash bag, is not just a cold case solved after 20 years, but a reflection of broader U.S. social issues today. Lena's confiding to friends about wanting to end her relationship and leave Iowa for physical therapy school, only to be thwarted by David Miller's controlling and possessive nature, highlights the latent danger of intimate partner violence. Notably, neighbors heard arguments. Friends noticed abnormal control, but those warning signs weren't taken seriously until it was too late. This is a stark reminder for American society today. When we witness signs of violence, even arguments or excessive control, we must intervene, offer support, or report to authorities. The case also showcases modern technology's power, from genetic genealogy to trace DNA analysis, delivering delayed justice. Yet, justice is only meaningful alongside prevention. No more Lenas should wait decades to be heard. The lesson for American life today is that individuals, communities, schools, and organizations must actively build safe environments for women and youth, encouraging escape from toxic relationships before it's too late. While strongly supporting domestic violence prevention programs, justice may come late, as with Lena, but prevention and early action are the way to avoid repeated tragedies. Thank you for joining us in the journey to reclaim justice for Lena Marie after 20 years of waiting. Subscribe to our channel to not miss the next true crime stories where the past is illuminated and justice always finds its way.